Alright guys, tonight I'm going to be looking at this JBL Studio 530 bookshelf speaker. I have two of them. The other one's just still hooked up. You only really need one for the review, so we'll just go over it and see what we think. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to run down the specs right from JBL's website. Get the specs out of the way, and then we'll move it around, take a closer look. Alright, frequency response 45 hertz up to 40,000 hertz, measured down measured at down to -6 dB. So it's I don't remember the exact measurements off the top of my head, but it's achieving that 45 hertz to 40,000 hertz all the way down to a -6 dB. So I do remember from the published measurements by ASR or Audio Science Review, these really start to drop off past 14 or 15,000 hertz, which it's not really a big deal. Most adults, whether most of them think they can't really hear past 14 or 15,000 hertz anyway. So for most people, it's probably not going to be a huge deal. Recommended amplifier power 125 watts, sensitivity 86 dB. So being not a very sensitive speaker, they do take a little bit more power to really get them going. 6 ohms, 1-inch compression driver with neodymium magnet and one-piece 2NX diaphragm on a glass-filled ABS biradial horn. So basically a 1-inch compression driver with this giant waveguide around it. I can't remember what's the saying. I think it goes, not every waveguide is a horn, but every horn is a waveguide. Something like that. Moving down to the woofer, which we'll see in a minute. It's a 5 1/4 polyplast cast aluminum frame woofer with symmetrical field geometry, magnet structure, and rubber surround. A good quality 5 1/4 woofer. Bass reflex ported design. Black finish, dual gold plated speaker binding post, bi-wire capable. Port tube inserts are included for attenuating bass in the 50 to 100 hertz region to compensate for room placement. We'll look at those in a minute. They're in with accessories. Overall dimensions 8 and 7/16 wide, 18 and 3/8 high by 8 and 3/4 inches deep. So they're not really that deep. Because of this giant horn they did down here, they increased the height a lot of it, so they didn't have to make them very deep. Which, if you're looking for a bookshelf speaker that's not super deep, this might fit the bill. Like if height isn't an issue, if depth is the main issue, these are quite shallow for how big they are. And 5-year warranty. And then obviously the first thing everybody notices about these is the whole top half, or pretty much the horn, the way it's designed, influences the whole front of the speaker, which is neat. It makes it a very unique, very noticeable, very memorable design, as this horn that implementing the horn into the entire face of the speaker carries through the entire Studio series all the way up. Was it the 530, 570, 580, and 590s? The grill comes off. It's just got a little hook here at the top that hooks into that, and then you just have your plastic nubs and rubber sockets down here. Good quality, a lot of plastic, very well-made grill, and a looks to be aluminum but probably plastic JBL logo, which is fine. And then once you take the grills off, if you want to leave them off, they give you these kind of blanks to take place, and then they have this rubberized foam on the back side of the plastic here to probably help reduce any resonances in the plastic. And that just pops in there like that. And there you go. Now you can run them with the cover off, although they still kind of look weird because they still look like a cover's missing. It would have been kind of neat if this piece included a hole, I don't know, structure that went around the woofer, but it might have affected the woofer's performance. So yeah, that's kind of neat. They give you this extra piece so you can run it both ways. We'll keep moving around. As you can see, it's got a very unique shape. It tapers back. It's a kind of a, look at it from the back, it's like a trapezoid, then it's slanted on top. I don't know the technical term for that complete shape, but yeah, having these edges all taper back gets rid of any 90-degree corners inside the cabinet, which helps reduce standing waves. As how much this affects its actual sound. Obviously, it can be done without making a speaker this shape. It's not. They don't do that to a lot of their other speakers. But yeah, very unique shape. It kind of gives it this miniature, like high performance or miniature PA speaker kind of style, like for your house. On the back, your Studio 530 label, blah blah. They don't really give you any information on these labels anymore. A lot of them, I mean, some speaker brands still give you maybe a frequency response in the ohms, but this one, they've just given you just the ohms. You don't need to worry about anything else. Nice little porthole here. It's rather flared. It's it's bigger than it looks once you get up in there. She's tighter than she looks. But yeah, a nice flared port. There's the biampable, biwireable binding posts. Oh, let me bring it up here. They're nice, thick, good, heavy quality binding posts. But you're gonna have to get some aftermarket, wire bridges, because those flat bridges, they just destroy the sound of any speaker. That's why, brands like Sonos Faber and stuff, include them with their speakers, and they're fine on a $20,000 set of speakers, but if you think if all they had to do was put better jumpers in there to improve the sound of the speaker, it'd be a very inexpensive thing to do, a very easy way to make your speaker sound better, very easy and cheap way to make your speaker sound better. I'm willing to bet putting in some like heavy duty fancy audiophile jumpers on there instead of the flat bridges probably wouldn't change anything in a measurement point of view, or however you want to look at it. Let's see, the accessories, while we got turned around, we already went over the horn piece. You get, well, let's look at the manual here first. This is like the biggest manual I've ever gotten with a speaker, and it's the actual manual isn't that long. It's just they include like 150,000 languages, pretty much every language known to man, every language that they probably sell their speakers in. And JBL being a worldwide company, they probably sell their speakers to a lot of different countries, so you got a lot of languages in here. Oh, and it's for all the speaker specifications. You get the 580, 570, 580s, and 590s in here. So not only all languages, all models in the series. What they didn't list on their site is the crossover frequency is 1500 hertz, and they weigh 17 pounds each. But yeah, you get a nice thick manual for, it says right on the front, for the Studio 5 series. So it's for all of them. Then I've never had any other speakers I've bought include these. I didn't know what these were at first until you read what it comes with, and it says it comes with port plugs to deal with that 50 to 100 hertz response in certain rooms, whatever. You can take these and they're quite porous. They're not very dense. You can easily blow air right through them. So I don't think these are actually I haven't actually used them. I've totally forgot about them. This whole time I've been testing, I forgot these were in there. But the fact that they're so porous and you can easily blow air right through them, I don't think they're actually acting as necessarily a plug. Like once you get it all up in there, it's probably definitely going to reduce airflow uh, in and out of the port, or that exchange of pressure, or however you want to look at it. But that is definitely not airtight. So I don't know if it's. You couldn't even really say it's acting as in a periodic vent, because I believe periodic vents don't actually let any air, escape or be sucked back into the enclosure. Only let sound waves through. So this is kind of like a breathable periodic vent or something, because there's no way this is gonna actually be airtight. Oh yeah, there's no way. Yeah, you put that in there and you push on the cone, it pretty much creates no acoustic suspension. Really, it doesn't change at all when you manually move the cone of the woofer. So whatever, it doesn't matter. JBL, engineered or measured this, and this is what they. If you're trying to change response based on your room in that 50 to 100 hertz or whatever, this is what they give you. I assume they know what they're doing, so it's not. I guess it's just not. That's necessarily. It's not necessarily a port plug. It's like a port baffle, air baffle or something. And then they give you these nice rubber feet to put on the bottom. Good stuff. Good grippy rubber feet to go on the bottom. So you get a decent amount of accessories. They seem well made. They're heavy. And I know this doesn't always mean much. I more do it to just because it kind of helps me determine how thick the cabinet is. It's pretty dead, so I'm gonna guess the MDF they use on these is pretty thick, pretty solid, or fairly well braced. Bring the horn up here. It's got a nice screen mesh over the compression driver there, which is pretty common on horn drivers to just kind of keep crap from getting up in there and then not being able to get it back out. So there it'll focus. Yeah, you can kind of see it up in there. And there's the meaty 5 1/4 polyplast aluminum cone symmetrical magnet woofer. So, yeah. I mean, I'm not making fun of it. All the listening I've done with these, one of my favorite things about them is the low end bass is pretty, for a speaker this size, because considering by the time you chop all this down and how it narrows down, there's probably not really a whole lot of cabinet volume inside this, and the fact that it doesn't kind of get down to 45 hertz. It sounds like it really gets down to 45 hertz, and even down at 45, it's a pretty, I don't say pretty, it's a very clear, deep, clean bass all the way down to 45 hertz. So, not much else to go over here. Let's get this one hooked back up on the stand and get everything set up, and we'll have a listen and kind of talk about them some more. Okay, I got the JBL Studio 530s set up here next to the JBL Stage A130s. Price-wise, not necessarily a fair comparison, as the Studio 530s are when MSRP double the price on sale. I think the A130s usually go on sale for, I can't remember, like 140 or 150. Usually they're 180. And then the 530s will often be on sale sometimes once in a while for like 250, but usually like 400. So they're usually about double the price, I guess. But comparing things based on price, it's fair, I guess, but at the same time, quite often in the audio realm, things that are more expensive don't always sound better or perform better, because there's not really any. It's so subjective. It's kind of like a blank check, just whatever, even though they are not in the same price category, it doesn't mean they can't be compared necessarily. I'm comparing them because I have both of them, and I prefer one over the other. And it just happens to be the cheaper one. which isn't the first time this sort of thing's happened. And like I said, I've had it happen quite often where the more expensive option doesn't always sound better. Might look better on paper, but when I actually sit here and listen to it, or even sometimes measure it, again, in this case, the cheaper option actually sounds and measures better. So I'm just going to run through one song, and like I do with all my, or I try to mention in all my little comparison videos, it's not really a fidelity test. I'm very aware you can't actually do a true sound comparison fidelity test through YouTube. Doesn't matter. I don't care if you have the best everything in the world to record it. Once you take that video and upload it to YouTube, it goes into their algorithm and their compression and everything, and then you listen back to it on your headphones or your speakers, which you can't evaluate. You can't really evaluate two other speakers by listening to them through another speaker. It just doesn't work that way. You have to use your own ears. I mean, it might give you some sort of idea, but that and the room they're being recorded in is probably not going to be like your room. They're going to sound different in your room. Even these speakers, when I take them upstairs to my bedroom, to my living room, to back down here, they sound different, like noticeably different in every room. So there's just way too many factors to do a true fidelity test through YouTube, period. This is just, I go through a couple songs and I go back and forth just so you guys can listen and you guys pick out or decide what you hear, what differences you hear. Usually through in this sort of test, it's only super obvious differences, which is fine. That might be all some people need to make a decision. So again, this is not like some fidelity test. This is just a very rudimentary side-to-side comparison. Take what you want from it. We'll start out, it'll be on the Stage 530s, and I'll just announce when I'm going to switch because I don't have everything set back up on the TV to have it show back and forth. So I'll just say when I'm going to switch it. It's on the Studio 530s right now. And no, the subwoofer's not on. A130s. Studio 530. A130. Studio 530. A130. $530. A130. Studio 530. I'll go back and forth without announcing it now. Anyway, let me stop this. At least just turn it way down. Anyway, the first thing I noticed, well, the first thing most people are going to notice with the Studio 530 is the way it looks. It's a very unique looking speaker, and one company that knows very well that a very unique speaker can immediately get people's attention and make it think it's a better speaker by its looks is Harman or JBL, because they've done the science on it. Quite often, if you let the listener see the speaker, they typically pick, well, the one is the best sounding. They typically pick the one that looks the fanciest or the most expensive. So the appearance of the Studio series probably has a lot to do with what JBL was going for, and they did a good job. They're a very unique, very interesting looking speaker. Now, whether having that massive horn on there, what it really does, it's not necessary. There's obviously lots of other really good sounding bookshelf speakers that aren't, 2/3 horn on the front. But it is a very unique style and design, which I do really like. But that aside, when you actually just listen to them next to the 530s, where the 530s are a more conventional looking bookshelf speaker, it's just a box. Then you have I think it's an aluminum dome tweeter with a waveguide. It's not a horn, it's just a waveguide. Going back and forth, like with a lot of my other tests, if I wasn't able to literally put them side by side and go back and forth, a lot of these things really wouldn't be that noticeable. It's just the way human hearing works. But when you put something side by side, then the differences in fidelity become very apparent. And since I've heard them side by side both ways, if I leave the room and have somebody change it and I come back, I know which speaker. I know whether it's the 530 or the A130 on, because their sound signature is that different. It's not that the 530 sound bad or anything. They do sound really good. But for me, at least, and you can probably kind of hear it in the side-by-side demonstration, they really have no mid-range or really even mid-bass. They just sound to me, to simply put it, they kind of just sound like a big horn with a woofer. Because the one thing they do really well is that 45 hertz, they at least, and in my, your room is going to affect that, they get really deep and clean. Good, deep, clean bass. Very accurate, deep, and clean bass. Not a ton deeper than the A130s, but noticeably a little deeper. I think the A130s are rated down to 50 or 55, but you can tell the Studio 530s do get deeper. And it's a nice, deep, clean, deep, accurate bass. But other than that, when you get to the mid-bass, there's nothing there. The highs are great. The compression driver with the massive waveguide or horn is very clear, very accurate. Sometimes things do sound kind of and a lot. The hard thing too with doing this is a lot of it can have to do with the material you're listening to. But I listened to that song on both speakers, and sometimes on the 530s versus the A130s, like a cymbal crash or certain high frequencies kind of sound small and thin. So not necessarily as realistic to where on the A130s, they just sound so much bigger. Where the 530s, they sound small. I don't know. And part of it is their lower sensitivity. You put more power into them and kind of, drive them to louder levels. They do wake up a little bit, but just they don't sound very big. Like the A130s, if you had a veil in front or a blanket in front of here, they sound much bigger than they are. Very big, dynamic sounding speaker. Large sound stage, super good imaging. And that's the other thing with like the 530s. I've moved them, like when I have them set up like this and I'm doing my tests, the A130s are imaging so well. Like I was listening to Tom Petty the other night, and his voice has a very noticeable voice and texture to his voice, and it sounded, you could have swore that Magnavox boombox was just playing Tom Petty vocals. The imaging, and it wasn't even like right in the middle. It was in the middle and up, just like he was standing there. I could almost feel his voice coming off of, that center. The imaging was just great. And then I played that same song over on the 530s, and it's not as good. I mean, the imaging is there, but it wasn't creating like that physical presence, like right there in the middle, like he was standing there singing. And okay, maybe it's just their location. So I swapped them places with the A130, swapped them, speaker stands, and, kind of went through the process of getting everything pointed again and went through the same song again. And it was the exact same scenario, even though I swapped them places. Either way, the A130s were imaging way better, more dynamic. The main thing that's noticeable to me is they're more efficient. So they're easier to drive. They're louder. But the main thing to me that makes them seem more full and lively is they have mid-bass and mid-range, where the 530s just seem kind of thin in the middle. I'm not sure. Some people may like that. It makes them sound kind of weak and small on top of that, combined with their lower sensitivity. And like I said, yeah, you start pushing a lot of power into them, they do wake up a bit, but that mid bass, when the tweeter is doing, or not the mid bass, when the tweeter's doing more the mid range, one thing I pay attention to a lot with when I listen to speakers is I listen to my music rather loud, and up to, I don't know what frequency, but up to a certain range, you can kind of feel a presence in those frequencies well up into the mid range. Like when you have it cranked up and somebody's really smacking a snare drum. If you have a 5 1/4 or a 6 1/2 or an 8 or whatever making that sound of that snare drum, you feel it. When a tweeter's making that sound, you can hear it, but you don't really feel it. In that sound that should seem bigger and more physical, it just doesn't happen when a tweeter. And I think a big portion, or one of the big reasons I should say why the 530s sound the way they do is because they're crossed over so low. You have the compression tweeter or compression horn, whatever, doing a lot more of the mid range. Where on the A130s, I don't remember where they're crossed over at. I think it's around 3,000. I don't remember off the top of my head. But you have the 5 1/4 doing a lot more of the mid range, and a lot more than frequencies. It just makes them seem much bigger and fuller. And when you turn them up, you feel a lot more of that mid range, which is, when you go to live events and stuff, you feel a lot of that. Especially if you're anywhere near the front. So the A130s have a much bigger live, more like full live sound because of that. When it comes to detail in the high end, I still think even the A130s have more detail. I don't the last time I checked my hearing was just a couple weeks ago, and I just did a simple like YouTube hearing test, and I scored up to, I think it was 17 or 17.5 kilohertz, which I don't know why I can still hear that. I've always had very sensitive ears as a kid. I had very sensitive ears. I could never sleep with the TV on, the old tube TVs, because old tube TVs had this really high pitched ringing sound they made, and it would, when I was a kid, I couldn't sleep with a TV on or in a room with a TV or anything, because I could hear that really annoying high-pitched ringing sound that the old TVs would make. It would drive me nuts. I've always had really sensitive hearing, but growing up on a farm and running equipment and shooting guns and doing all these loud things and, racing cars and stuff, I would have thought my high frequency would have diminished more, but I did it with headphones and just the regular speakers I have in front of me, and both times I was able to distinguish up to 17,000. So I guess that's good for my age and my history. But I don't know if it really has much to do with what I'm hearing between the two. I know the Studio 530s really start to drop off around 14 or 15,000, but that's actually really high. A lot of music, there's not much going on really above 10 or 12 a lot of times. I know the A130s are rated higher, and they measure more flat to a higher frequency, so that may be contributing to a little more of their detail. But to me, even the high end, the A130s seem to have more detail and clarity without being, I don't know, I hate getting into these weird audiophile adjectives, but they're not sterile or clinical. The highs are still natural. It's just they have really good clarity and detail even in the highs. Where the 530s, the highs are really good. But the main thing I noticed the difference was, for me anyway, is they tend to make some high frequency sounds or instruments sound kind of small. They're not the certain things that are in the high frequency range don't seem as large and dynamic, I guess, as they do on the A130s. I don't know. So what it basically boils down to, for me anyway, is the JBLs that are half the price seem to sound better. At least to me anyway. And then even if you want to get into objective measurements and everything, even on, I believe if I remember right, when they were measured on Audio Science Review, the A130s across the board measure better. If you want to, if you're looking for a speaker that measures well, is very flat, which flat doesn't mean boring. Flat just means, transparent, where the speaker is not necessarily coloring sound in, one way or another. It's just a very faithful, transparent response, which is what some people want. Other people don't, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. If what's sitting in front of me, if I had to pick, the A130s would be my number one. The Sony CS5 would be my number two, and the Studio 530s would be my number three. And I did get a little bit excited about him. If you watch any of Z's reviews on him, he's absolutely gushing over them and all this other stuff. And a lot of the other reviewers really liked them, which is fine. They have different rooms and different ears and different preferences, whatever. But for me, I just wasn't really blown away by them. I'm blown away by their looks, which can go a long way if you don't know what if you're not just I'm kind of a devil's advocate or a skeptic, kind of all for everything. I don't really care how good something looks or all the hype or anything behind it. All I care about is when I hook it up and I listen to it. I have a kind of a sound I'm going for most of the time, and they just didn't do it for me, I guess. Not JBL's fault or anything. I'm sure they had a goal they were going for with them. What I don't get is on their website, though, they tend to market them a lot for like home theater, but their low sensitivity and their I don't want to say poor, because it's not like the horns sound battering. The horns sound good, but their low sensitivity and their low frequency range, they kind of start rolling off at that 14 to 15,000, doesn't really make for good home theater speakers. Definitely more for music, but they seem to advertise. I mean, they make center channels and everything. They definitely market them as being used in home theater, but they don't really have the kind of the basic attributes of a good home theater speaker. So I don't know what JBL is doing there. They should definitely be more marketing these for music. I don't, like I said, I don't have my record player going. It works, but it needs to be kind of overhauled. It needs I think it needs a new cartridge or needle or whatever, and the speed needs to be checked on. Because I would like to try the 530s with vinyl. Because if they were in a color spectrum, they would be definitely more on the warm side to me, where the A130s are kind of more right in the middle. Very, very neutral, very clean, neutral speaker that has a big, I keep bumping the camera stand, very big dynamic sound. They actually remind me of, they're like a better sounding CS5. The CS5s have kind of that similar attribute, kind of what makes them noticeable is they have mid-range, but the mid-range isn't like overly annoying. They just have good mid-range, which makes them good mid-bass and good mid-range and good highs, which makes them seem large and dynamic. Where the A130s are very similar, but they're just a little bit tighter and cleaner. So they're like, to me, they're kind of like a better Sony CS5. Yeah, I don't know what else to rant on about. I tried them in all different rooms. The difference in sound signature remains in each room. It doesn't matter where I put them or what I do with them. The 530s never magically gained their mid bass and mid range back, although I didn't really try the port plugs. And then the other thing that did it for me is, like I said, with the highs, the treble, and certain songs, certain instruments, it just made things sound sometimes just kind of small and thin. We're on the A130s. I would say high frequencies, instruments that are making those high frequencies just sounded bigger and more dynamic on the A130s. And this is all my subjective opinion. JBL does offer, I think it's a 30-day, no hassle. You can buy any of their speakers, and I highly recommend often just buying them right off JBL's website, because they are doing sales all the time on their speakers, all the time. And I think they almost always offer free shipping, even on like towers and stuff. I got these 530s. Normally, I think MSRP is $600. They're usually on sale almost always for like $419.99, for like $420, and then once in a while, they will be on sale for $250. Free shipping on JBL's website. And it's not just it seems like it's mostly the Studio series, so it's not just the 530s. The 530s, the 570s, the 580s, 590s go on sale at least up to this point that I've noticed, knock on wood, a lot. I've seen the 590, the big 590 towers on sale for, I think it was almost less than half price with free shipping. I think it was like, for a pair, I want to say it was like $500 or $600. Free shipping on the big 590 towers. So, and then even there's a subwoofer that goes in the Studio. I can't remember, it's like the P130. I don't want to throw out a number. I don't remember. But yeah, if you're interested in JBL speakers, don't hesitate. Don't go to Harman's website. They list them too, because Harman owns JBL and Samsung owns Harman. But Harman doesn't seem to have the sales as often. JBL's actual website, seems like there's always stuff on sale on their site. And it's usually, sometimes JBL sale price, like when I got these for $250, they weren't $249.99 on anyone else's website, not Amazon or B&H Photo or Crutchfield or anyone else that sells them at the time. The only place that had them on sale for $250 was JBL.com. And I just accidentally kind of stumbled upon them. I'm like, I thought these things are way more expensive than that. I'm like, oh, there's got to be some sort of catch. The shipping's probably like $100 or something. No, free shipping, $250. I'm like, buy now. So, yeah. And it's the same thing with the A130s. They don't go on sale quite as often. I got mine for, I think MSRP is $300. They will often be on sale, oh, what is it, like $220? And then they often go on sale for like $180. I got mine at $180. I probably will. I'm not going to do a comparison video with the CS5s versus the Studio 530s, just because the sound signature is totally different. But I think maybe one of my next videos will be the A130s and the Sony CS5s together. So, sorry if this is drug out and boring. I think like some of the other YouTubers have said, it's easier when the speaker's just bad, because then you're just like, yeah, don't buy the speaker. It's, you know. But the 530s and the A130s are both really good speakers. I probably wouldn't really pay $420 or $600 for the 530s. If you really like their looks and there's something about them you really like, if you just wait, you can usually find them for like $250. They go on sale and they come up on eBay, you know, used for a good price. But if you're not stuck on the Studio 530s, I would, in my opinion, I would definitely go with the Stage A130s. Over, I mean, usually you can find them for $180 over really any other speaker I've tested. If you can afford, if $180 is close to your budget, what you want to spend, yeah, the A130s are definitely what I would go with. And the other reason is just a lot of other speakers I've tested or listened to or heard that cost much more, or other bookshelf speakers that cost much more. The A130s keep right up with them. And then if you get into measurements that like Audio Science Review did, they are objectively out measuring and outperforming speakers costing much, much more. You know, even some bookshelf speakers that are over $1,000. You know, that's just one thing you gotta be careful with audio. Just because it's expensive doesn't mean all that's going towards Fidelity. A lot of the higher end stuff, you're also paying for aesthetics, you know, looks, build quality, materials. There's a lot of other things that go into, you know, audio products. So the A130s are kind of just a testament of how good a speaker can be at a very low cost. I'm sure JBL didn't do it on accident. I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing, and the measurements show that, and it just goes to prove you don't always need a lot of really expensive stuff or expensive drivers and materials to make a speaker that sounds and measures well. I think that's going to be it for this one. Put your comments down below. It's like 2 in the morning. I'm super tired. I'm forgetting half the stuff I'm saying. I need to go to bed. So thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, and hopefully you come back for the next video. Good night.